Greetings and welcome to the channel. I was wondering what the average Social Security benefit is and what income it takes to receive it. Figuring out the income then made me ask, what percentage of income does Social Security replace for high versus low income individuals? Because of the way it's calculated, I knew it replaced a higher percentage of low income, but how does it compare? I started with the formula that determines average indexed monthly earnings for the old age benefit. As you can see, AIM, or that average index monthly earnings, is the sum of the 35 highest years of indexed earnings divided by 35 times 12, or the number of months in 35 years. In our example, the lifetime earnings were $1.5 million. This is index adjusted, so this is not the actual earnings for the lifetime. It's actually much less than this because it gets indexed, and we'll get into that later. Divide that by 35 times 12, and that's $3,644 per month in this example. Now that we have an AIM value, we can calculate the primary insurance amount, or PIA. The PIA is based on Ben points and different weightings depending on the Ben point and the income levels of the average index monthly earnings. PIA at eligibility equals 90% of the first $1,226 of the monthly earnings, plus 32% of the next $6,165 of monthly earnings, plus 15% of the remainder of the monthly earnings, up to a maximum of $7,013. In our example, the average index monthly earnings of $3,644 equates to a PIA of $1,877.10. That gets rounded down to the nearest whole dollar, $1,877. The average benefit changes each month, but the Social Security website says the January 2025 average benefit was $1,976. Using the calculations I just covered means the average indexed monthly earnings would need to be $3,964 per month, or $47,448 per year. In 1980, an income of $8,912 indexes to about $47,448, and the tax paid by both employee and employer would have been $905. And you can see on the spreadsheet that in 1980, the Social Security tax rate was actually 10.16%, and it's mostly been 12.4% since then, with a couple minor exceptions, but for the most part, 12.4%. In 1990, to get that $47,448 indexed amount, you would have needed to earn $14,975. In 2000, it would have been $23,448. 2010, you would have needed to make $29,680. And in 2020, an amount of $39,618 indexes to about $47,448. And these amounts, if you had 35 years of earning around $47,448, you would receive the average January 2025 benefit of $1,976. I've included this chart to give a visual representation of what indexing does to income. As you can see, throughout the years, starting in 1980 in this example, our $8,900 indexes to $47,448. So whatever your earnings were in those years, say in 1980 you earned around $5,000, it's going to index to be about 5 times that amount. The maximum Social Security benefit for 2025 is $4,018 per month and requires an average index monthly earnings of $14,404 per month. Since there is a cap to income that is taxed for Social Security and used in the calculation, you can't just get the max by making a few $1 million for 3 or 4 years. For example, the maximum for 2003 is $87,000. That's the most that you will pay Social Security tax on, and that's also the most that will be used in the calculation. It does index to $170,000, but it's still only $170,000 as opposed to if you made $1 million in 2003, it would still only index to $170,000 because it's only going to use the $87,000. The taxable maximum for 2025, for example, is $176,100. So generally, no year is going to index for more than the current year's taxable maximum of $176,000. There may be, I didn't go year by year to verify that none of them index higher than that, but odds are they don't. If they do, it's around that number. Finally, I wanted to include some numbers on how much your benefit will replace at various levels of average index monthly earnings. And the first one I put was an average index monthly earnings of $1,226, which is the first bend point, which means that 90% would be replaced. So if you averaged $1,226, your primary insurance amount would be $1,103 or 90%. If your monthly earnings were $4,298, your PIA would be $1,976, which is the average we've been going over. And that would replace about 46% of that income. If it was $7,391, your PIA would be $2,966 and replace about 40% of those monthly earnings. And finally, at the maximum of $14,400, the PIA would be $4,018 and would replace about 28%. And I put a note in here, it's about 12 times the average income lifetime, but only about 4 times the benefit. And that's because of the way the Social Security formula works. The lower income is going to be replaced at a higher percentage than the higher income. I hope you found this interesting. I thought including a visual representation of how indexing works with the Social Security formula would give people a better idea of how their prior income, even though it might have been really low, will be indexed over the years, and they do adjust it basically for inflation. It's a wage inflation calculation, but it might give you a better idea of, hey, I only earn, X amount in this year, but, so that's going to get averaged in, but they're going to index it before they average it in to calculate your benefit. As always, if you have comments or questions, leave those below. And remember, if you're going to retire, retire to something.